Hi, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Rachel, and today we are going to be making chaga tea. So in my previous video, we went over one of the methods that I use to process chaga to be able to make it into a tea or use it in some other means for its medicinal value. So what is chaga exactly? We're gonna just briefly discuss that before we go into making our tea. It's just gonna be a quick overview of what chaga is. Now, chaga is a fungus that grows on trees, primarily birch trees. You will occasionally find it on other trees. I've never found it on anything other than birch trees. But there is a lot of controversy as to whether or not it still has the same medicinal value if it's growing on another tree, since chaga tends to absorb a lot of its medicinal values from the tree it's growing on, from the birch tree. So that's where we're getting a lot of those medicines from. So I will only harvest it, and I've only ever found it on birch trees. You can find lots of pictures of it on the internet. It usually looks like a very large, like black mass, almost a burnt charcoal kind of mass on the outside of a birch tree. And then if you break it off, in the middle, it's a very bright orange, kind of corky material, and that is what chaga looks like. Now, chaga is the sclerotial body of the fungus, not the fruiting body portion of it that we typically refer to when we're talking about mushrooms. So the sclerotial body is actually the mycelium portion of the fungus, and that's what we're using for our tea. Now, chaga contains many bioactive ingredients, and we're not going to go into detail on all of these different ingredients. We're just going to focus on two main groups or elements, and that includes polysaccharides and triterpenes. So we'll go into further detail on those. So we'll discuss these compounds in more detail once we get our tea going. For right now, what I want to do is just get the tea going, get it simmering, and that way, because that will take a minimum of 2 hours, I would say. You're probably better off simmering it for longer, just to draw out the majority of those compounds. But at least I would say 2 hours you want to simmer your chaga for. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to start this tea, and then we can go into detail in more of the medicinal values of the mushroom. So what I have here is a gallon of distilled water. I live in town here, so the tap water contains a lot of chlorine and other chemicals I don't want getting into my tea. So I've gone and purchased, this is a gallon of distilled water. You can use spring water. If you have well water, that should be fine as well. So to a gallon of water, I am only using about a quarter of a cup of chaga. And this should be fine. You could use more if you want, but I don't really think it's necessary personally and from experience. So this quarter of a cup should be just fine. And you'll see as it simmers how much is coming out of that chaga. So we've got a quarter of a cup here. I'm just going to put this right into my water. And I'm going to turn this on a medium temperature, low to medium. I don't want it too high. There's a lot of conflict or contradiction between whether or not you should boil your tea first, bring it to a boil, and then reduce the heat and simmer it. Sorry about the interruption, the phone rang there. So we've got our quarter of a cup of chaga. It's in the water here. I'm going to turn it on to a medium heat, and I'm going to avoid boiling this just because I worry that it may destroy some of the compounds in the chaga. And honestly, the process of heating the chaga, all you're really doing is breaking down those cell walls, because with fungus, unlike plant material where the cell walls are composed of cellulose, in fungus, the cell walls are composed of chitin, and chitin is a very tough, very hard material. I believe it may actually be one of the hardest natural materials on Earth. So by heating it up, we're breaking up those cell walls and allowing it to release those properties, those elements of the chaga. So that's why we're going to heat it up. If you just soak it in water here, you're probably not going to get much, if anything, because you haven't broken up that chitin to allow that those polysaccharides and such to leach out into your water. So I'm just going to turn it on a medium heat here. Like I said, I'm going to avoid boiling it, although some people say that you should boil it, like bring it to boil and then reduce the heat and simmer it. I might experiment a little bit with that and see if I find any difference. But for right now, this is how I do it. It seems to work. I've never had any issues, and I find that the chaga still has a good effect, a good quality on me. So we're gonna leave that for at least 2 hours. That's what I would recommend. If you want to leave it longer, you can leave it longer. That's even better because you'll get out more of those compounds. You can also do this in a slow cooker, or crock pot. So you do the same thing, put your water and your chaga in there, put it on a low to medium heat, and you can leave it for hours, or some people will leave it overnight. And then you can strain it out just like you would here. And with this chaga, what I will do actually is when I'm done making this batch of tea, I will actually use it again, probably 2 or 3 times, until I find that I'm not getting a really dark brew out of the tea anymore, and all of those antioxidants and such have already come out, leached out into the tea. So we're just going to leave this, and we'll come back in probably about 2 hours and see how it's doing. So I will stir it occasionally as it simmers. The chaga should sink to the bottom of the pot, and so I'll stir it just to make sure that it's not clumping up at the bottom. So while we are waiting for the chaga to steep and to brew a little bit longer, I thought we would discuss some of these medicinal compounds found in the chaga, those 2 main groups that I believe I mentioned earlier, which were polysaccharides and triterpenes. Now, focusing on the polysaccharides, these are mainly the water-soluble compounds found in your chaga, and they include beta-D-glucans, and these beta-D-glucans are actually responsible for some of the immune modulating properties of the tea. So the benefits of an immune modulator versus an immune booster is that not only with the modulator, if your system is weakened and you need to fight off an infection or a flu bug or a cold or something, with the immune booster, it will boost your system and you can fight off that infection or whatever your body is dealing with. But with an immune modulator, it will do that. Or if your system is working in the opposite way, where it's overcharged and overstimulated, such as say in the case of an allergy or an autoimmune system, your immune system needs to be sort of calmed down and brought back down because it's working in overdrive and it's overcharged. And so an immune booster isn't going to help you in that case. So with the immune modulator, the benefit is that it will actually target whichever situation your body is dealing with at the time. So if you need an immune boost, then this will do that. It will target that and it will actually boost your immune system. But if your immune system is in overdrive, it will react to that and it will help to calm it down. So it can work in either or. And that's why this is one of the very valuable teas that I like to use. It can work in either case. So that's definitely a benefit of the polysaccharides in your chaga. So that's one of the benefits of the polysaccharides. Now, polysaccharides are also known as antioxidants, and many of us are probably familiar with that term, especially when we're talking about cancer and cancer treatments. So antioxidants can target cancer cells and inhibit cancer cells. So it's actually good as an anti-cancer sort of treatment. Not necessarily, obviously, I'm not a scientist, so I can't tell you it's going to cure your cancer or anything like that. But it has been known, and there have been studies that have found that these medicinal values, these medicinal compounds found in chaga can actually help to inhibit certain cancer cells. So we already have that it's anti-cancerous, it's an immune modulator, and some of the other benefits of these polysaccharides is that they can actually help not only to modulate the immune system, but they can help with modulating blood pressure and blood sugar as well. So if you have high blood pressure, low blood pressure, high blood sugar, low blood sugar, maybe you're diabetic, the compounds in your chaga tea will actually help your body to balance and to modulate those issues. So maybe you have diabetes, maybe you have heart conditions. This tea may help with that situation that you're in. So moving on to the triterpenes now. The triterpenes in chaga that you find mainly are betulin and betulinic acid, which you find in many of the medicinal mushrooms that you will harvest. The betulin is contained mainly in that black outer crust of the chaga fungus. So that's one of the reasons when I process it, I process the whole fungus. I'm not going to throw away that black outer crust because there's a lot of medicine in that black crust. So I'm not just going to throw that away. Of course, the betulin is still contained in the inner kind of corky material, but it's just in higher concentrations in that black outer crust. Now, the triterpenes are not the ones that we're discussing, are not water soluble, so they're water insoluble, which means that in our tea here, we're not actually going to extract those triterpenes. If we want to do that, we're going to have to do a different extraction, such as an alcohol extraction to withdraw all of those compounds. So if we want both the polysaccharides and the triterpenes, a dual extraction, which is the tea extraction and an alcohol extraction, is going to be your best bet. And you can actually perform that with the same chaga. So you can take the chaga from this chaga tea and reuse that in an alcohol extraction. If I was going to do a dual extraction, I would start with the alcohol extraction first. You don't have to, but I would, because depending on the quantity of fluid that you're going to get from that alcohol extraction, that's going to alter how much water you're going to need, how much tea you're going to need to do a dual extraction if you're combining the two. So, like I said, we're not going to withdraw all of these triterpenes when we're doing our hot water extraction, but we're still going to discuss some of the benefits of that in case you want to do an alcohol extraction. So triterpenes include betulin and betulinic acid. Both of these are found to be anti-inflammatory, anti-cancerous, antiviral, and they've actually been linked to cases where they've lowered cholesterol and blood sugar levels. So again, just like the polysaccharides, it's going to be good for your heart, it's going to be good for your blood system, it's going to be good for, say, if you have diabetes or just keeping your blood sugars modulated and balanced. So these are properties of the triterpenes in our chaga. And many of these properties sort of overlap with the polysaccharides. So while we're not getting everything out of this chaga in this one brewing system, we're still getting a lot of those properties in the tea. So whether you're talking about the triterpenes or the polysaccharides, they are both very helpful compounds found in the chaga tea, and I would suggest not wasting any of those. With this particular batch, what I'm going to do is I will brew it down. I'll extract the tea from this first batch after, say, 2+ hours of steeping and simmering, and then I will reuse it, the same chaga. So I can add fresh water into it and then just do the same process over again. Or what I may do, if I don't have time today, is I'll actually dry out the chaga from this batch. So I'll throw it in my dehydrator actually after I've kind of squeezed out all of the moisture out of it, because I don't want it to get moldy. So I'm going to put it in the dehydrator and dehydrate it so I can use it later again, and I'll store it separately as a second extraction instead of just putting it in with my original chaga powder. And then I will do tea again another time when I have time, or I can use it for the alcohol extraction. Now, the thing about the alcohol extraction and the hot water extraction, and the reason that you can use the same chaga, the same batch of chaga to do both, is because right now with the tea, all we're extracting are those water-soluble compounds. We can't pull out those water-insoluble compounds such as the triterpenes. But when we do the alcohol extraction, we can draw out those triterpenes. We're not going to draw out the polysaccharides. So when we're done with this chaga, we've taken out all of those polysaccharides, all of those water-soluble compounds, but we've left in the triterpenes. So then when we put it into the alcohol extraction, all it's going to do is pull out those triterpenes, and then we've taken both of them out of that fungus. So I just wanted to come back and show you guys what this looks like after only 15 minutes of simmering. You can already notice the really dark color in the water from all of those polysaccharides, all of those antioxidants leaching out into the water. So it works very quickly. We're still going to leave it for the 2 hours to try and draw out all of those compounds. And then we'll come back and we'll look at it again. When we're done, it should be a very dark color, almost a coffee kind of color. And that's what we're going for, that's what we want. So we'll come back again in a bit and check on it and see how it's doing. So we've discussed polysaccharides and triterpenes in our chaga. Some of the compounds that we haven't mentioned, which I'll just go through briefly here, are lipids and phytosterols. And again, surprise, both of these are responsible for lowering cholesterol and anti-cancerous, so inhibiting those cancer cells and cancer cell growth. Some of the other compounds in your chaga include high levels of zinc, copper, iron, and manganese. And what these all have in common is that they actually help your body to stimulate an enzyme production. And this enzyme is superoxide dismutase. And again, these superoxide dismutase are anti-cancerous, or they're responsible for certain anti-cancerous effects. One of the other ingredients that you will find in your chaga includes melanin, which is contained in very high concentrations in that outer crust again of the chaga fungus. And this is actually responsible for some of those anti-cancer properties, including helping with the treatment of melanomas of skin cancers. The melanin in that black outer crust is going to help the body to target and inhibit those cancerous cells. So that's another reason that you really do not want to discard that black outer crust of your chaga fungus, because a lot of those compounds are very medicinal, very helpful, and you may not be getting them in your inner orange corky material, or you may not be getting them in as high concentrations. So make the most use of your chaga fungus. Experiment with it. Try the hot water extraction. If you're feeling brave, maybe try an alcohol extraction. There's a few videos on YouTube, I believe, that may go into detail about that. I may do a video as well on that at some point in time, but for right now, we're just going to stick with the chaga tea. So we're just going to check on this and see how it's going. It's been going for about an hour now, and I'll just show you here what it looks like now. So the chaga has been brewing for about an hour now, and you can already see that it has a really nice dark color, and that is all the antioxidants leaching out of the chaga fungus into your water. So that is a really good sign to see it's got a really nice dark color. And as long as you're getting that dark color when you're doing your tea, use it as many times as you want until that color starts to fade and you get a much lighter color. Then you're not extracting all of those polysaccharides anymore. But I mean, you can still do a tea with it if you'd like. It just may not be as strong, may not have as high quantities of those medicinal compounds. But this is just after an hour. We're going to leave it for another hour and check on it and see if it's ready to pour out. Welcome back. So our tea has been steeping for a little over 2 hours now, and it's ready to come off. So I'm just going to show you what I have set up over here. So I've got a container here. I've just covered it with cheesecloth, made kind of a little bit of a dimple in the middle there, and I've just got an elastic around the edge of it just to hold it in place so when I put the tea in there, it doesn't fall in. And I've got a second one over here as well, because there's quite a bit. We're going to end up with quite a bit of tea here. I've got a ladle because I'm going to ladle this out into here rather than pouring it, just to reduce the mess, hopefully. So I'm just going to turn off the element here, and then we'll start scooping it up into our containers here. So grab my ladle. And you can see it's got a fairly decent dark color there. Ideally, I would like to leave it longer and get a bit of a deeper color out of it, but this will do. And because I'm going to use this chaga again when I do the second batch, I can leave it longer. Unfortunately, I'm on a little bit of a time limit here today, so. Trying not to make too big of a mess here. And that chaga was quite fine, so that's why I'm using the cheesecloth. If I was using large chunks of chaga, then I would probably just scoop those out of the mixture and do the tea that way. I wouldn't really need to filter it this much, but because we're using a powder, that's why I've chosen this method. So I'll finish filling these up and then we'll come back. So our chaga is just draining out here and filtering through the cheesecloth. I'm gonna take it off and just give it a good squeeze to try and get out any of that excess moisture there. And you can see it's got a really nice dark color. That's what we want. Give that a couple of squeezes there. And I'm gonna save this chaga, like I said, to reuse it again. So I'm just gonna set it off to the side. So I've got this second container of chaga and I'm just gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna take this elastic off, set it off to the side for it now, and I'll give this a good squeeze to try and get rid of all that tea that's still in that cheesecloth and in that chaga. Okay, and I'll set that off to the side. So we filtered out most of the tea into those two larger containers, but I still have a little bit left in this pot, so I wanted to drink some fresh tea, so I'm just going to filter it out into these 2 cups here. And then that way I will have a nice hot tea to try. So we filtered all of our tea into 2 large containers here, and these containers I'll cool off and put them in the fridge, and they'll last me throughout the week. I can use from them. And then I also have a cup of fresh tea here to try out as well, and we'll give that a taste test and just see what it tastes like. And just like I remember, it's just a very mild, kind of earthy flavor, nothing too strong. If you want, you can sweeten it with honey or whatever you like to put in your teas, but it's very mild, very enjoyable. So if you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe down below, and we'll see you in the next video.